This is part 2 of our duck boat video series where we are showing you how to wire up your duck boat project. If you have somehow come across this video and you haven't watched part 1, you need to go do that. I'll link to it right up here. Because if you don't watch that, you're not going to understand any of what's going on right now. So where we left off in part 1 is we made our panel that's going to hold all of our electrical stuff, and we made a nice little recess for it to fit in here. We cut out a hole for our switch panel, and we went ahead and started running some of the wires. We ran our trolling motor wires all the way up to the front, installed that trolling motor plug, and we ran all of the interior lighting that's going to be inside the gun box, underneath the front deck, and all that fun stuff. So we need to turn our attention back up here to the front of the boat again. We've got 2 things that we need to wire in. The first is going to be a nav light, and in this particular boat, I'm going to use a nav light base so that I can plug in a nav light pole. And there's also going to be a driving light or a light bar, whatever you want to call it, up here on the front. So I need to run the wiring for that. In order to do that, I need to drill 2 holes. The first one I'm going to drill is going to be for the nav light. I want it to be right here, dead center in the front of the boat, but I need to make sure that when I drill the hole, it's not too far forward so that I can still get to this nav light base. And I don't want to be too far back so it's just out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to try to keep it up close in the front, mark my center line, and we'll drill a hole right there. And you'll have to check your particular nav light, but the one that comes in our kits uses a 1 1/8" hole. Go right here in the front center. I'm just drilling down into this foam, trying to get as much of it out of the way as I can. I hate this styrofoam crap. I gotta break up some of this foam in here so that I can get the nav light base to fit. Throw our wires in here and give us a quick test fit, and that looks good. I'm going to need 1 more hole to run our light bar lights through up here on the deck somewhere. Having a hole up here, even with a grommet, would not only look bad, it would let water get down in there, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to use one of these wire covers. These are just some cheap ones you can buy off Amazon. And I'm going to put this kind of up here as far forward as I can get. Now, I do have to keep in mind, I got the front angle of the boat that I got to contend with, so I don't want to be drilling through the front of the boat. So I'm going to go just to the side of where this is at. Actually, no, I changed my mind. I'm going to do it on this side because I'm going to have trolling motor mount over here. So really nothing else that I can put here anyways. And if I decide later on I want to put a small graph or something up here on the front deck, I will be able to run that wire over and install that graph right here. So we're going to go right over in this general area somewhere. I'm just going to take my little Sharpie and put me a couple marks on here so I know where I'm going. And then I'll put another mark kind of right here across the front so I know not to go up past that line. I prefer to have the hole, kind of in this general area so the wires can come out and go forward and you really can't see it from the front. But you just don't want the hole to go past the front here. So what we're going to shoot for is to put the hole somewhere right in here. And for that, we'll also use an 1 1/8" as well. And then we'll proceed to trying to get as much foam out of here as we can. I want to have as clear of a passage as I can between these 2 holes so that when I drill my hole underneath the front deck, I can run the wires straight through into this, and then I can run them over here to this side. So the next fun thing we got to do is drill a hole underneath our front deck right here. Now, I do have that piece of framing that I have to go up underneath that 1 1/2" angle that we put up here. But what I'm going to try to do is line it up as close as I can. Is when I put this hole in, I want to be able to take my screwdriver and knock as much of that foam out of the way as I can right in here so that we can have a clean wire run. And then when we get done drilling the hole, we'll install a grommet. So let's get out our handy dandy ruler, which is a Sharpie today, and that looks like it's about straight. All right, now we got our hole drilled. Hope you can see this well, but we're just going to start chipping away at this piece of foam, get a hole going through there. So with a little redneck engineering, I come up with a faster way to do this. This little contraption right here is a drill bit extender. It's got 2 set screws so you can hold, any kind of drill bit attachment that you want. And then I just took a 1/4" hex wrench. It's a little Allen key wrench, whatever you want to call it. And I'd use those set screws to tighten it down in there. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put that down in that little hole right there and give her a whirl. And I have essentially made a whole bunch of snow. Not quite long enough to get to where I need to go, so I'm going to put 1 more little extension on there. I had a little short extension. We'll see if that's long enough to get us to where we need to go and make more snow. Man, that was so much easier than digging all that foam out. All right, with that mostly cleaned up, I can pretty much guarantee that the first 10 trips out in this boat, I will be finding pieces of snowman poop everywhere. God, I hate that styrofoam. All right, so just push my grommet in there, make sure it fits, and we can go ahead and start running some wire. I'm going to start right here, since this is going to be the hardest part, is making sure that we get this up to the front, see if we can make it through there. And there we go. That worked out really, really easy. Now, I'm running a 16 gauge duplex wire. And why I'm running a 16 gauge? Because that's all I need for this little LED front nav light. These things pull very, very little power, usually in the tenths of an amp. The highest range that I've ever seen is about 8/10 of an amp is what a front LED nav light pulls. So 16 gauge duplex is what I'm using. And by duplex, I mean it has a red and black positive and negative wire inside of a white sheeting, and that's what we're going to be using. And this is what the 16 gauge duplex is, what comes in our premium wiring kit if you buy that. So I got that out. That looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and start running it towards the back. So if you'll remember, over here on this side is where we ran our power wires for the trolling motor and the ground wire. And then of course we got some other wiring for the lights that are in the gun box and over here. So what I want to do is I want to move some of the wiring over here to this side of the boat. I've already got 2 zip tie holders up here for the wiring that's going to this light and this light. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this around over here. We'll put some more zip tie holders up front. I'll put some more zip tie holders along this piece of framing, and then we can tie all that wiring in and then go into our cavity. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and rough run everything. I've got it around our vertical support. I pulled out a whole bunch of wire. I'm just going to run this into that cavity and down the side of the boat. And we'll lay that right there for right now. Let's go ahead and get our zip tie holders installed. Next up, we're going to be running some 14 gauge wire, just a little bit bigger, and that is going to go to our light bar. So we'll run this in through our grommet and see if this one wants to cooperate as well as the other one did. Well, looky there. That's so much easier than trying to run a wire snake all through this boat. We'll put that through the hole that has our wire cover on it. So this one's for the nav light. That's a 16 gauge. 14 gauge going to be for the light bar. And same thing we did with the 16 gauge. We're just going to pull some wire out and run it around on this side of the boat. I'll just leave that there for right now. So that being the last 2 wires that we've got to run, I'm going to go ahead and start trying to tidy this up and get stuff zip tied out of the way. So all of our wiring tidied up, I'm going to go ahead and pull to my mark that I made on the last video, which is right up here on the subfloor, and that gives me plenty of extra length on these wires to run them and be able to pull the switch panel out and work however I need to. Now that I've got those cut down to the size that I need, I'm going to take 1 wire at a time, trace myself back to behind this panel, and pull all of this excess out. And then I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to go ahead and split this wire. We're not actually cutting the wire, we're cutting the sheathing on the outside of the wire. And I'm just using a razor blade to cut right down the middle. You ain't got to go super deep. You're not trying to cut all the way through. You just need to score it real well. And all we're trying to do is just expose the red and the black wire so that we can put them in the places that they need to go. Once you get it split, all you have to do is just open it up like this and then pull. And even if you didn't cut all the way through, like I got a couple of spots right there, that'll pull it all out. And then you can just cut off the sheeting because you don't need it anymore. Now, this wire that I'm cutting, let's see, what size is this? This is 16. So this is for our front nav light. Now, if you don't already own one of these label makers, now's a great time to do one. I know that it's not super cool and it's super beta male to own a label maker, but this is your excuse. You don't label the wires in your boat, so go buy you a label maker. If you're too cool to buy a label maker, get you some painter's tape or some Scotch tape or something, fold a piece of tape in half and write on the outside what each one of these wires goes to. Oh man, that's so cool. I think I'll do it again. So go ahead and take these wires and run them to their respective places. We want the negative wire is going to be going to the fuse block, so we'll run that through our recessed hole over here for the fuse block. And then our positive wire is going to come out over here on the switch panel side, because that's what it's going to attach to, is the back of the switch panel. So we'll run it out there. And then we can take our handy dandy little labels that we made, because we're super cool and bought a label maker. And I usually go back a little ways from the end of the wire, and I'll put that label on right there. And there we go. There is our positive wire for the front nav light. Now we'll do the black wire. And there we go. Now we got front nav light, ground wire. We'll put that right over here. And then we're just going to repeat the same process for this wire, which is our 14 gauge. And that is going to go to our light bar. Moving on to the back of the boat, we need to install our light pole base for our rear anchor light, or rear nav light as some people like to call it. It's actually an anchor light. And most people like to install them up here. I personally like them on the deck right here, because I like to put some turf up here and make this look nice. But I think we got enough room to where we can make this work. So I'm going to put this up here, because I know that's what everyone else likes. This boat ain't for me. It's for y'all. I'm going to hold this upside down so I can figure out where my holes need to be. All right. So this is the area that I have to work in. And the hole itself, I'm just going to draw some reference marks where exactly it needs to be. I'll just put 2 lines over here on the side, and then I'll do the same thing in the front. Put some lines here. And we'll just take anything that's relatively straight. We'll use this screwdriver to kind of put our lines on here so we can reference exactly where this hole needs to be. And that gives me a little bit of a starting point. Just put a little X right there. Now with these rear navigation lights, the hole is actually only just slightly bigger than 1 1/8, but because a lot of them are angled like this one, I'm going to need to drill just a slightly bigger hole. So I'm going to go with 1 1/4 inches. Oh, that's going to be a problem. That's right on the top of our transom. You know, that big old thick, awesome aluminum transom I put in here? Yeah, that's not going to work. So that hole's definitely getting covered up with turf. Let's go with plan C and put it where I like to put it, which is right here on the back deck. Now, the only thing I have to watch out for is I need to make sure that since this pole is going to be going in at an angle, that it's not going to be so close to the back that the pole actually hits this rear support. So I'm going to go forward just a little bit and make sure I spin it in the right direction, because it's actually going to mount like this. So turn it upside down. And remember, I've got a piece of framing in here, so I am going to have to come back just a little bit. So we'll go right here, trace this out. And then same thing, we'll put a couple of reference marks on there for the outsides of the hole. And we'll just use something straight to kind of get us some guidelines. Double check, make sure there's nothing underneath that I'm going to hit. I think we're good. Sometimes with these angled pieces, they're not going to fit in exactly because they're, angled. They got a little bit of a angle, because angle. So the easiest way to go about that is to take one of these like step down bits and just kind of run it along the side and waller the back side of the hole out a little bit. And then that will fit right in place. Just like we did with the front of the boat, we'll run our nav light wire in there. I'm using 16 gauge again, and I'm not actually drilling a hole back here. There is a little bit of a little notch on the side of the boat, or like a rib, if you want to call it, that runs down the side. And I left a gap in between that rib and the wall so that I could run wires through there. I'll pull this through up to here and to our mark. That should be plenty of wire right there. To keep this from falling through, I'm just going to loop this into a little bit of a knot. That way it won't fall through there. And then just like we did with the other wires, I'm going to strip the sheeting back, split the 2 wires, put the ground wire over here where our fuse block is going to be, positive over here where our switch panel is going to be, and put a label on both of them so that I know where they go. Next thing we need to get ready to wire up is our plashlight LED light strips. And the ones I'm going to be using in this boat are RGBW. Now what RGBW stands for is red, green, blue, and white. They use light strips. Will do all of the variety of colors and plus white. Now when you buy a new roll, this is a 2-foot roll, it's going to come with this black wiring harness just like this. And it's going to have all the wiring already installed on it. You get a red, blue, green, white, and black. Here in our shop and in a lot of our boat builds, we run strips of lights on the gunnel rail or the inside of the gunnel rail to light up the inside and outside of the boat. And we usually wind up with these long little cutoffs that we don't really need anymore. I always save them because you can actually connect new wires to these, which we're going to show in detail when we actually install these in another video. This little, 1.5 to 2-foot strip would work great to go up underneath the rear bench right here. And we can also use another little strip for up in the front. Now, again, we're going to do a complete very thorough install video of how to do this in the future. It'll be its own separate video. Real quickly, what we use is these little connectors. I buy these on Amazon. They're strip light connectors. And they have a place for each one of the wires to go in, and then you'll squeeze this down with a pair of pliers, and that will actually make contact with all the wires. We'll seal that up with some silicone. And then on the other side, we'll strip back some of the silicone that's on these plashlights, install that right there, give it a nice squeeze, and that will give us new power wires. Now for wiring, it's also something that you can purchase from Plashlight if you want to. They will sell it to you like this. It's just a black sheeting with the 5 wires inside of it. I unfortunately don't have any of that right now. I have just some RGBW wire that I got from Amazon. Essentially the same thing as the flashlight wires. It has red, green, blue, white, and black. And I got this big spool of it for real cheap. So we're going to go ahead and run all of our wiring for the inside flashlights that we need in the boat. So we're not actually going to be installing the flashlights in this video. We're just going to be running the wire. And the first wire that I need to run is going to be for the strip that goes underneath this little back bench right here. Now, I'm just going to use a step down bit and get in here as far as I can, as far back as I can at least, and drill me a hole. With that hole drilled, I can come in here with our RGBW wiring and run some wire out right here. I'm only going to run just enough of that RGBW wire to get me to this little access area right here where our recessed panel is going to go. And I'll go ahead and cut that off. And I can go ahead and use a razor blade to cut in between these wires and split them in half, because I am going to be tying these in to the wires that are going up front, which I will show you in more detail here in just a second. Flashlight strip that I'm going to install is going to be underneath this lip right here where that opening is at. So I'm just going to peel me off some wire, start back here where our opening is at, and run it through our open cavity. Now, remember I left this zip tie holder open earlier. This is why I did it, so I could put that right there. I'm going to run this in between some of the other wires, and I just need enough to where I can attach the flashlight to it later on when we do that video. We're actually going to do that after we paint. It'll be one of the final things that we install. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of slack right there. Come back over here, make sure I've got enough slack to attach these two together pretty easily. And I'll go ahead and cut that wire off. And just like I did with the other wires, I'm going to cut in between all of these with a razor blade. That will separate the wires so that we can get them all connected. And then we're going to take our wires that are coming from the back and the wires that are coming from the front and connect them together with some small butt connectors. Now, the reason that I'm having to connect these wires together now is because we've got 4 total light strips that we've got to tie together. We're going to have 2, one on each of the outside of the gunnel rails, and then we're going to have this one underneath the back bench and then one up underneath the front deck. These wires are small and they don't do well going into big wire connector like a blue butt connector for 14-16 gauge wire. These are teeny tiny little wires, and for that you need these small butt connectors like this. And I don't want to force all 4 of the light strips into one connector and try to connect them all and then connect it to the controller. So what I'm going to do is take the front deck light and the rear bench light, tie those 2 together, and then whenever we run the wiring for our outside gunnel lights, we can tie it into that lead. That way we're not forcing 4 sets of wires all together at one time in one connector. So I'm going to take all of our wires from our first strip. This is the one that goes up front, and we'll strip them back. Then we'll take the ones from the rear and do the same exact thing. Now it's just a matter of putting our 2 wire colors together, and we'll start with white. We'll give those a good twist, slide on one of our pink 22 to 18 gauge butt connectors, and give that a good crimp. And then we'll do that with all the rest of the colors, same exact procedure. With all of those tied together, we're going to take a short lead of our RGBW wire. Don't need much, maybe just 8-10 inches or something like that. Then we'll come in here and split all of these apart with a razor blade. Sometimes you can grab these and pull them apart. Sometimes they're pretty well stuck together. I just use a razor blade. It's real simple and easy. And sometimes when you go to pull them apart, you see how I pulled that green wire away from the red? It actually pulled the sheeting away, so I have to cut that off. So that's it. That's all we need to do is just tie all those wires together. And we do our final flashlight install, and we get the lights on the outside ran into here, which will be super simple because they're just going to be coming from the back and go through that little wall and then come right here. We can attach all those wires together. Then we'll take our little lead wire, put that in there, and connect this into the controller. again, we'll cover all this in another video coming up soon. And for now, we'll just tuck these back in here, and they're not going anywhere. The last thing that we have to wire in is our bilge pump. The one that we're going to be using is an automatic bilge pump, and it has the option to run it off of a switch and connected straight to power so that it has a float in the back of it, and then when it floats, it'll turn on automatically. And where I'm going to be mounting it is in this very back corner underneath the back deck right here. And I've already checked my fuel tank fitment. It will fit right in this area with the bilge pump all the way in this back corner. I'm not putting it here in the center or over here next to where our battery tray is, because to get the fuel tank in there, it's kind of a tight squeeze, and it's a lot easier to get the entire fuel tank in and out, especially when it's full, if this is back over here. So to mount this, I'm going to be doing something really simple. I'm going to be using Scotch mount double-sided extreme tape. I get this at like Lowe's, Home Depot. I'm pretty sure you can get it at Amazon as well. It comes in these little easy, convenient strips, and all we need to do is clean the bottom of our bilge pump with some acetone. I've got some acetone in the squirt bottle. So we're going to wipe this thing down real good, make sure it's good and clean. And same thing down here on the floor. We're going to wipe the floor down real good, make sure it's nice and clean. Peel the backing off of this and install it right here on our bilge pump. Give it a good press. Then we can peel the backing tape off of this side and stick it to the floor of the boat. Now these things, just in my experience from using these, sometimes you got to get in here with a razor blade and kind of peel that edge up. And once you get it started, it usually comes off pretty easy. And then I'm going to install this with the wiring facing towards the wall and the output for the hose facing towards the front of the boat. Give it a good press. We are good. That is not going anywhere. Now, typically, these bilge pumps come with a ton of extra wire on them. So I'm going to go ahead and run this through that hole, or that little gap that I've got in between the back wall and that rib on the side of the boat. And go ahead and push all those wires through. And I should be able to reach in here and grab all three of them. I've actually got enough to where I can run it into this little cavity and still have some room to work. And these automatic bilge pumps are going to have, like I said, 3 wires. You're going to have your black, which is your ground. You're going to have a solid brown, typically. So the solid brown would be your switched power. So this is actually going to go to our switch panel, and we use that to flip the bilge pump on manually on and off. And then it's usually going to have a brown wire with a white stripe. And on this one, it's actually labeled. It says positive only. This is your automatic bilge pump wire. Now, you get 2 different options to wire this up. One, you can run this straight to the fuse block on the positive side. So that way it is only getting power when the main switch for the battery is on. Now, if you're in a situation where you're going to be mooring this boat, or you're going to be parking it at a dock for a long period of time, you probably want to run this straight to the battery so that it is always on no matter what. As long as your battery has juice in it, then this will work the automatic part of the bilge pump. The only thing to keep in mind is if it rains for several days or something like that and your battery's running low, this thing will drain the battery completely. I'm going to do this the first way we talked about this and run this straight to the fuse block positive side. For now, I'm just going to focus on these 2 wires, your solid brown, which is going to be your manually switched power wire, and then the black wire, which is the ground. Strip both of those back and throw a butt connector on this. I'm going to be using 14 gauge wire for this. So I'll be using a blue butt connector, which is for 14 and 16 gauge wire. Throw that on there, give it a little crimp. And same thing for the brown. Just like I did with all the other connections, I'm going to come in here through our recessed panel area. I'm going to strip our white sheathing back just a little bit, cut off the excess, strip those wires back, and I'll go ahead and connect them to our bilge pump positive and negative wire. So our red positive wire is going to go to the solid brown wire, which is our manually switched, and then black is going to go to black, which is our ground. Then I'll just pull enough length of wire to get up to my mark in the front of the boat, and I'll go ahead and strip that white sheeting back. I'll leave our negative wire coming out of our recessed area. That's going to go to our fuse block, and then this positive will go over here to our switch. Make me a couple labels real quick. Try not to be jealous of my super awesome label maker. I know you're jealous. And the last thing I need to do is make myself 1 red wire to go from our automatic brown and white wire here can go straight to this fuse block. I don't need a whole lot, just enough to where I can get this pulled out of here. I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to go ahead and strip the entire white sheathing away from these two wires right here. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I really only need the red wire, but we're going to save that black wire because we can use it when we go to wire up our switch panel, which will be in an upcoming video once we get done painting the boat. That'll be one of the final things that we do in this video series is wiring up the switch panel. We'll just pull all that wire out of that sheeting. Now you can go absolutely and buy some just red 14 gauge wire if you want to, but we've got all this 14 duplex that we're using. So already got it, might as well use it. So we'll strip that back, put a butt connector on it. Then we'll take our brown and white wire for the automatic portion of the bilge pump, strip it back, give it a little twist, and then we will attach it to the other side of our butt connector. Then I can run this out of our recessed panel area, and it can just live right there for right now. I'm going to make me another label that says auto bilge, so I know that that is the wire for the automatic portion of the bilge pump. So with all of our wiring ran, we can now do a little bit of connector work. I got all of my ground wires here that are coming out of our recessed panel area, and then I've got that automatic bilge pump wire that's also going to be connected straight to the fuse block. So I want to go ahead and get all the connectors put on this now so that when we go to install this panel, all I got to do is slide the wires through that hole and hook them up. Now, the way this panel works is each one of these lugs up here on top, those are going to be our negative lugs. And in order to attach our ground wires, we're going to need some number 10 ring terminals. If you buy a kit from us that includes terminals, you will get this in the kit. That's going to be your deluxe, premium, and supreme kits. And that's what you're going to use to attach to each one of those lugs right there. We're not actually going to be attaching this today because we still got to paint all of this. So I'll just go through and strip each one of these wires back real quick. Now, since these wires are going to be visible on our fuse block, I'm going to go ahead and just slide a small piece of heat shrink over each one of them before I put the connector on. That way we don't have these bright blue butt connectors showing on our fuse panel. So go ahead and crimp each one of those on real quick. I'll go through each one of those wires and attach a blue ring terminal to each one. Once they're all crimped, I'm going to get out the heat gun and I'm going to melt the heat shrink on each one of the blue connectors. Once they're all melted and I let it cool down for just a minute, I'm going to come back with that black heat shrink tube that I put on each one of the wires and slide it up and over the blue part of the heat shrink so that I can cover up that blue and we won't be able to see it once it's installed on the actual fuse block itself. And once I have the black heat shrink on each one of those, it will look something like this. So I'm not going to be using these wires for a while, so I'm going to take some black electrical tape and just kind of wrap them up, and that way I can tuck them back up underneath that cavity behind where the fuse block is going to be and keep them out of the way while we're painting. For all of these red power wires that are coming out of the hole where our switch panel is going to go, I need to install a different kind of connector, and that is going to be this blue 14-16 gauge flat spade connector. This is the female spade connector that's going to attach to the back of the switches. And they go on just like all the other connectors do. A simple crimp, and then I'm going to come back with a heat gun and heat shrink all of that blue heat shrink down. Now these are not going to be seen, so I don't need to put any black heat shrink over the top of them. Just a regular blue heat shrink will work just fine. And before I forget, we're going to go back and heat shrink all of those wires that we connected to the bilge pump and get the heat shrink on the connectors melted down for those. Just like we did with our other bundle of wires, I'm not going to be using these for a while, so I'm going to take some of that black electrical tape, just wrap all these wires together temporarily and put them back inside the hole where the switch panel is going to be. That way they'll be back behind that cavity and they'll stay out of the way while we're getting the inside of the boat painted. Okay, I lied. We got one more thing to wire, and that is going to be our main power wire that is going to go back to the battery. We got our trolling motor power wire that goes back to the battery, and then our main negative wire that also goes back to the batteries. I've taken those three wires that I need, I've run them in through our hole for our recessed panel, and I ran them around back to where the battery is going to be. We'll get to the battery part in a second. Let's focus on this side. So that main negative wire that we ran is going to be the one that attaches to the top of our fuse block. This is going to be the main ground for everything up here on top of the fuse block. So that's where that's going to attach. So that's that wire. Then we've got our main power wire that comes from the battery, and that is going to be attaching to one side of our battery on-off switch. So if you pop this off, you'll look, you got two terminals on the back of this battery on-off switch. This one we're going to use for our main power going back to the battery, and then this one is going to have a separate wire which we'll run later Not really worried about it right this second, but we're going to run a wire from there through our grommet, and it's going to run to the main positive side of our fuse block. And you see right there where it says positive. So that's that wire. Let's lay it out of the way. And then this is going to be our main power wire that's going to go to our circuit breaker. So we'll run it in from the back side through that grommet. On the circuit breaker, it's got two different sides. One that says battery. Right there, it says battery. And then over here, you got this one that says auxiliary. Now, each one of these cables is going to require a little bit different of a connector. The two that we're going to be using are these 1/4-inch ring terminals that are for our 6 AWG wire, and these are 10 copper lugs, so they are marine rated. And the other one we're going to be using is a 3/8 inch. Now, the 3/8 is what we're going to attach to the battery and the battery on-off switch. The 1/4-inch size, the smaller one, is what we're going to be using to attach to the fuse block and to the circuit breaker. And to attach these is really simple. All you need to do is strip back enough wire so that it fits completely into the connector. Before you put the connector on, you want to go ahead and slide you some heat shrink over the wire. That way you can cover up the connection with the heat shrink. And then you're going to go in with a pair of lineman's pliers or a big pair of crimpers and crimp the connection onto the wire. Now, these are really thick and they are 6 gauge, so you're going to need to apply some pressure. I wouldn't recommend doing this with a standard set of crimping pliers. You're going to need lineman's pliers or an actual set of heavy-duty crimping pliers. Once you have the correct size terminal, whether that be 1/4-inch or 3/8 attached to each one of these wires, then you can slide that heat shrink back up and get it heat shrunk down to protect that connection. And I always bust out my handy-dandy label maker and make a label for each one of these wires and attach it to the wire, so that way if I ever have to go in and do any repairs or move things around or add wire to it, I know what each one of these go to. Moving back to the back of the boat, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for our fuse panel and circuit breaker, but we're going to do it back here in the back where it's going to actually attach to the battery. And for that, we're going to be using all 3/8 terminal lugs because that is the size that we need for our battery. So I'll run each one of those wires back through our open zip ties that we have back in the back of the boat over to where the battery is going to be. And I'm going to leave a little bit of extra slack so that if I ever need to remove the battery, I can actually pull the battery out away from that decking and undo the connections, and then I can pull the battery out without any problems. Then we'll attach our 3/8 terminal lugs to each one along with some heat shrink, and then we can just leave those in the back because we won't need them again until it's actually time to hook up the battery. Now, I'm not going to zip tie all these wires together just yet. I got them still loose in here because we've still got to run the outside gunnel plashlights. But with that, we're done with everything wiring that we can do. Now, if you're following along for the entire duck boat build, then very next video that we've got to do is putting all the decking back on the boat. And there's like a couple hundred rivets that got to go in. Flip the boat over, wash it really good, and get everything prepped for paint. And then the following video, we will get started painting the outside of the boat. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our paint sponsor for this build, and it's going to be One Hit Wonder Paint. Not only did they provide all of the paint for this build, but they also provided me with a really cool new spray gun that they're going to be offering. It's supposedly really good for painting John boats, so we're going to test that out and you guys will get to see it. So all that's coming up next. We'll catch you on the next one.